What's going on, everyone? My name is Alex Pahar. I am a registered investment advisor representative in Arizona, and I work for Optima Capital. And I'm also a Guideline Pro advisor. And today I'm going to talk about more in-depth Guideline and when you're selecting funds, how you should look at it. And so, without further ado, I'm going to get into it. So, if you don't know, this is Guideline. And when people talk about fintech, very few people mention Guideline. And I think honestly, they are the most innovative from what I've seen in a very long time. There's no AI stuff. It's just a very good product. So basically, it makes 401k plans easier, cheaper and easier and faster. So just as from their slide deck, pretty much you can make a 7 times cheaper 401k with no transaction fees and very low account fees. And I highlighted here the average expense of plan assets for a certain size of plans is 1.6%. And then guideline, that's around 0.35%. So uh, they really do make a difference. And when we're talking about 401k plans, that's thousands of dollars. So really, if you don't know what guideline is, essentially, it's a 401k where you have 40 funds. And so these are all Vanguard low cost index funds. You can see the 0.04% expense ratio. So they pretty much found 40 low expense ratio, high performing, um, diverse funds. And there's 40 of them. And I mean, you can read the white paper on all of them. You can look at the performance and everything on all of them and whatnot. And then the other part is their managed portfolios. So they have 6 of them. So usually, if you have Guideline, you'll take a quiz to assess your risk tolerance and what kind of returns you're hoping to achieve. There's a number of questions, and then it'll recommend one of these 6 portfolios. So you have the very aggressive, which is 95 stocks, 5% bonds. That goes all the way to conservative, which is 45% stocks, 55% bonds. And so if you go through all this, you could see the asset class, you could see the fund, you could see everything that's in it. And what it doesn't show you is the average return. So, oops, my bad. It'll show you the 1 year return of that fund, of that asset class inside the fund, but it won't show you of the overall fund. And so I calculated that on my Excel sheet. So what I did here is I pretty much just got the return for these portfolios on a 1, 5, 10-year basis as well as year to date. And so what I found is obviously the very aggressive had higher returns all the way down to the conservative, which had around a average annual return of 4.77%. And so pretty much they made great funds. However, the conservative fund, it's supposed to be lower, and that's because it's supposed to reduce risk. So if you go at the very aggressive fund, which is a 20% return of last year versus the 10-year return of 8.36, that's a difference of almost 12%. And if you go to the conservative one, which is a 11.43 on the 1 year, and then a 4.77% return on the 10-year, that's a difference of around 7%. And so basically, the more conservative, the less variance or risk, and the more aggressive, the higher return. And so pretty much I took these average returns, these annualized returns, and then I made tables with them. And so I made a couple assumptions. So here were my rules. So my job is to analyze 401ks and help people improve them. And so in my research, the average American has annual contributions of $3,500 a year. And so I put that as my base yearly contribution in my model. I didn't account for taxes. That's the whole point of 401ks. There's pre and post tax. I just assume these are all pre-tax, so this is just purely numbers based, no taxes involved, no distributions or whatnot. That would make it messy. And then I'm not accounting for intra-year volatility. Let's say the S&P or the whole entire market collapses tomorrow, and then my 401k deposit hits, and I get all these shares at the very bottom, and then obviously it goes back up. I'm not accounting for that. I'm just saying every year you get the annual return. Every year you contribute 3,500, and then it compounds over time. And then I took the S&P returns from the SPY prospectus, and that's a 10.35%. And I did it from inception because last year was it was a huge year for the SPY, for the index, and I kind of wanted a handicap. So pretty much I handicapped the index fund in the S&P in this scenario. So what you'll find is, from the very aggressive to the conservative, there's a huge difference over 40 years. We're talking $1 million difference. That is crazy. And then honestly, almost every single guideline fund has outperformed the average 401k fund, which is mind-boggling for how simple and cheap it is, or inexpensive. And then obviously the S&P was the king. And so here are the returns. Obviously, what you find is the S&P is the best. And I think that really comes down to a cultural thing. You know, people try to complicate the 401k, and they try to say, oh, you need this fund, you need to balance this risk, protect your principal. If you think about it, the 401k of pretty much every investor is the longest time horizon. The 401k is designed to not even be touched until you're 59 and a half. And so really, if you're going to take risk or if you're going to try and get return in the 401k, that is the best way to do it. And the best way to do in your 401k from the data is to just do it in the S&P index. That's about it. And so this goes back to Guideline. If you take the survey and it puts you in one of these funds, and now this is what I do. So my company uses Guideline. I'm actually the advisor for my company's Guideline plan. And if it's good enough for us, it's good enough for most people. And so pretty much if you make a custom portfolio on Guideline, which you can do instead of the 6 managed funds, what I would do is I would just go to the Vanguard 500 index. And you could go to the growth. You could say, well, hey, the growth had a higher rate of return. But I mean, if you go back to the past 10 years, the market has been very growth oriented. I would say really, at the very minimum, the VIFIAX or whatever you will is probably your best bet. And so if you have a Guideline, just be aware of that. You don't have to be in the custom portfolio or the managed portfolios, my bad. You can be in a custom one. And so for how simple Guideline is, it is extremely robust. I mean, with these 40 funds, you can do 99% of what any other person can do with a PCRA or a self-direct brokerage account. It is just, I have nothing but good things to say about Guideline. They do everything on an insanely innovative basis, and that's about it. So, if you have any questions or if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Thank you and have a good one.